Once, long ago, in the days of the ancient Greek gods, there was a wedding. And in this wedding, the gods had gathered together, and they were all together ready to celebrate the wonderful bride and groom. But the goddess of discord had arrived, and she was held away from the wedding, for she always brought chaos. And she, before being turned away from the wedding, rolled into the wedding space past the legs of the guardian Hermes, an apple. It was a golden apple, and it was marked with the words, "To the fairest." When that apple rolled in, 3 of the most powerful goddesses looked at that apple, and each wished to claim it for her own. Hera, queen of the goddesses, thought that she must be the one to possess it. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, felt that she was surely the fairest of them all. And Athena, the warrior goddess of wisdom, believed that she should be the one given the golden apple. None of the gods wished to weigh in on who deserved this apple, because they knew that if they chose one, then the other 2 would be angry at them. And so they decided to throw this choice to a mortal. They picked, strangely enough, a young man named Paris. Paris, who was chosen by the gods and was the son of the great city of Troy, had been cast out, for there was a prophecy that said that Paris would one day bring down the city of Troy. And so Paris had been sent away and lived as a shepherd. The 3 goddesses appeared to him next to a small stream that he was resting by, and they gave him the apple and said, "You must pick amongst us. Who is the fairest of the 3? Paris thought this was a very difficult decision, and like the gods, did not wish to lose the favor of the other 2. And so Paris said, "Is there any way that you could convince me why you are the fairest?" Hera promised him power. Athena promised him wisdom. But Aphrodite promised Paris that she would give to him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. The most beautiful woman in the world at that point was named Helen. And Helen was the daughter of a goddess herself, a nymph. And she had grown up to be a incredibly beautiful person, and all of the kings of Greece wanted her hand in marriage. As things got more and more contentious and each king wished to have her for his own, it was the great king Odysseus who suggested a plan. He said that to her father would be given the choice of who she would marry, and that all the other kings must sign a vow that no matter who was picked, they would all rally to support that person and the marriage to Helen. It was King Menelaus of Sparta who ended up winning the hand of fair Helen, and he took her back to his powerful warrior kingdom in Sparta. Now it wasn't too long before Paris left Troy on a diplomatic mission to go and visit Greece, which was across the Aegean Sea. When Paris arrived with his group of courtiers and supporters, he saw the beauty of Helen for his own eyes for the first time. And just as he imagined, she was stunning. Paris, while he was approaching her, was given a special gift by the goddess Aphrodite. She sent Eros, also known as Cupid, to fire an arrow into the heart of dear Helen, and when she saw Paris for the first time, she immediately fell deeply in love with him. Paris took Helen and snuck her out of the kingdom while her husband was away. He took her back to Troy, and the 2 of them moved into the great city of Troy. King Priam, the head of the king of Troy, and Paris's father, was not happy about this, for he knew that bringing this in would bring great misfortune to his city. But he could do nothing, and he, like everyone else, quickly fell in love with Helen. When Menelaus returned, he called out to all the kings of all of the many city-states and kingdoms of Greece and said, "Remember your vows. You must join with me to go and retrieve my wife, as you promised." His brother, Agamemnon, one of the high kings of all Greece, gathered together the other kings and their many, many ships and warriors, and called out for a mission to sail off to rescue Helen from Troy. When this great Greek fleet sailed across the Aegean and landed over on the coast of what is now modern-day Turkey, they marched in and immediately found themselves confronted by a Trojan army. The Greeks were ready for battle, for they were led not only by these two kings, the brothers Agamemnon and Menelaus, they had amongst them the greatest warrior of the world. This was someone whose mother also was a nymph. He was born of the gods, and when he was merely a baby, his mother took him by the heel and dipped him into the river Styx. As she submerged him all the way, his body was given a protection that nothing could harm him. He was given weapons forged by the god of the volcano, Hephaestus himself. And after he was given these, he was ready to go and fight against the Trojans. He also was joined by one of the great warriors, Ajax, and by many, many other Greeks who were seeking glory. When they arrived, they fought the Trojans, and the Trojans were forced to retreat back into the giant walls of their amazing city. Now the Greeks spent the next 9 years laying siege to Troy, trying to draw the Trojans out of their city and trying to take over and retrieve dear Helen from the city of Troy. They were unsuccessful. The walls were too strong. It was said that they long ago had been built by the gods themselves. And so, although there were many battles fought back and forth, the Trojans still remained safe after 9 years behind their city walls. In the 10th year, the next prince of Troy, the mighty warrior Hector, stepped out of the city to go and lead his forces against Achilles and all of the Greeks. A battle raged back and forth, and Achilles defeated Hector. Achilles had left the battles earlier due to a conflict with King Agamemnon, and his friend had donned his armor and gone into battle only to be killed by Hector. When Achilles had found this out, he sought out Hector, and in a fierce battle between the two, Achilles defeated Hector and rode around the city 7 times on his chariot, dragging the body of Hector behind. He took it back to his camp and left it to rot outside. King Priam came on his own in great humility to beg forgiveness for his son and to allow him to bring him back for a proper burial. Achilles allowed this to happen, and there was peace for a brief moment as Hector returned to Troy in a hero's welcome. The Greeks were getting frustrated. It was 10 years now that they had spent laying siege. They had conquered all of the land and territory around Troy, but they simply could not break the mighty city. They were frustrated and wanted to return home. Few wanted to return home more than the great warrior and brilliant thinker, Odysseus. And Odysseus finally convinced his fellow Greek kings to try a new plot to defeat the Trojans. They decided that they would make it look like they were leaving Troy, that they had given up. They spread rumors, telling that the Greeks had finally decided to leave. And as they packed up all of their ships and prepared to sail back, they built a giant wooden horse. This horse was enormous, huge enough that many, many men could fit inside of it. And they left message with a man who seemed wild and crazy, who seemed as though he had been abandoned by the Greeks, and they sailed away. When the Trojans left the city and came down and found the mighty horse that had been left behind by the Greeks, they looked at it and thought, "What should we do with this? Should we burn this to the ground? Should we destroy it?" And then the crazy man left behind came and told them a story, how the Greeks had left this as an offering to the gods, hoping that they would have no storms, safe passage back to their homes in Greece. Well, the Trojans believed the story, and they decided that if the Greeks had left this gift to the gods, then if they took this gift, they would be honored by the gods. The Trojans grabbed this giant horse and began dragging it into their city. They brought it up to the mighty city gates of Troy, and it was so big they had to take apart the gates just to fit it into the city. Up upon the city walls, the princess Cassandra looked down upon this. She wept because she had been telling everyone that the Greeks were going to play a terrible trick upon them and that they shouldn't believe them. But Cassandra had been given a gift and a curse. Her gift was that she could see the future. Her curse, that no one would believe her. And so, despite Cassandra's warnings, the Trojans opened their gates and pulled the giant horse inside. That night, they celebrated, throwing a large party. After 10 years of siege, finally they believed the war was over and the Greeks were gone. When everyone went to sleep late at night, they were all in all corners of the city, and out of the belly of the horse a door opened. A rope dropped down, and silently a whole group of Greek warriors, including Odysseus, slipped out. They went and opened the gates of the city that were now easier to open, for they had been changed to allow the horse in. And there, waiting on the outside, was the Greek army that had returned under cover of darkness. That whole night, the battles raged inside the city, but this time it was not an equally matched battle. It was the Greeks destroying everyone and everything and setting the city alight. In the temple of Athena, a very sacred object lay there. It was shaped like Athena's shield, and it was called the Palladium. Another prince of Troy had gone to the Palladium, had prayed to Athena to assist him and give him wisdom, and he took the sacred Palladium and fled the city. Taking only his family and friends, this man, named Aeneas, was able to escape Troy and get out to the coast, where he got upon a ship and sailed away. Aeneas would not be able to go and land anywhere on the islands or mainland of Greece, for as a Trojan, he would be found out and eventually killed. And so Aeneas and his people sailed far south past Greece and kept going west further and further until they came to a new land, a large peninsula that stretched down into the Mediterranean Sea. As they sailed up the coast, they found the mouth of a mighty river. At this river, they decided that they would settle and they would build a new home there, starting over once again. For although all the other Trojans had been wiped out, this small band of Trojans under Aeneas would found a great new city in the future. Someday, the ancestors would declare their vengeance upon the Greeks and would create an entire empire of their own. And that empire would one day be known as Rome.